Welcome to the Wednesday Honors Luncheon series.
Okay, let's get started. I try to create more of a round because there are so many faculty members. I didn't want this to be like a lecture environment, so pick a place. And first of all, thank you for coming. Welcome you. We have, as you see, many professors coming from the social sciences. For those of you who might not know some of them, Professor James Kahn, the chair of the economics department, Professor Ari Malka from the psychology department, Professor Kimmel from the sociology department, Professor Arusi from the political science department, Professor Bevan from the political science, the chair, Professor Galantucci from psychology, the chair of the department as well. So you see, guys, that they want to reach out to you. That's why they are here. So let me tell you just two things. The first is a statement of apology. I believe very soon after the conversation gets going, you know that Professor Adrian Ash, which was a professor involved with the university for many years, the director of our Center of Ethics, passed away yesterday, and there is a memorial starting in a few minutes that I have to attend. She was a mentor of a thesis in our program. I got an email from the student she mentored, who's finishing medical school now in Toronto. Probably we will try to organize something for her. She was in some sense a social scientist, and I feel that we should mark her presence. So she was incredible in our university. Eventually we'll do something for her, but at least I wanted to mention the occasion. So the origin of this was to have a conversation with students who are interested in the social sciences and are in the honors program, to see what the departments and the different social science disciplines have to offer to you. It came a little bit as a personal concern of mine. I talked with some of my colleagues in the leadership of the programs that we have many very good honors students in the social sciences. We feel that there is interest definitely in the social sciences in the university. Enrollment in the social sciences is growing. And yet, in the honors program, we don't feel that there are as many students taking the last step, engaging in research with professors and doing a one-year-long process of mentorship resulting in honors thesis. We have this year an incredible year in the sense that more than 30 students that are finishing the honors program this year, Michael is one of them here, are working with professors between 30 and 35, according to how you count, are working with professors, doing thesis, doing research with them. And I am not neglecting, and I'm sure Professor Galantucci will mention that there are many students doing research on campus in the social sciences. I'm not saying by any stretch that that is not happening. The psychology department is incredible in that respect. But they are not taking the long-term view of the long-term project that will send you and project you in a different way towards the world. Michael here being the exception. He's doing a thesis with Professor Annalisa Cohen and a group. You will perhaps say a few words later of what you are doing. And, because this is an interesting experience, not just here with a group. How did it start here? But it's working with a group in another university in the West Coast, etc. So we wanted to reach out to you and tell you why we think the social sciences are very vibrant, and I want the professors to speak and tell you what can it do for you. We have, Professor Bevan can tell you the tradition of students who with an effort and engaging professors here in research went out to do great things, fellowships, professorships in distinguished universities, etc. I mean, every department probably has stories like that, and they can tell you, and I wanted you guys to hear from them. What is it that those departments can offer you? Because I want you to be aware that if you are really serious and you like and you are passionate about the social sciences, there is a lot you can do to prepare yourself to future careers, to fellowships, to graduate programs, to professions, etc. and that the honors program, through the participation of these professors, can be very instrumental in that sense, since you are probably the students that are the highest qualified in our university. I never tire from repeating it. Whenever our university had Rhodes Scholars or Goldwater Scholars or Marshall Scholars, they were always students in the honors program. I mean, I am happy to report we are checking together with Professor Gellens, getting ready for our advising session that is starting particularly to the freshmen, that we need to reach out to the students whose GPA is not keeping in track with what the honors program requires, which is a very high GPA. And out of 240 students, we found, 3 that whose GPA is a little bit below the notch. So that means that you are, and we regard you as high achievers, as students who succeed, that in spite of taking honors courses and taking many of them, you get very good grades on them. So we know that you have the potential to reach out, and we want to see how the honors program is instrumental in helping, and how the departments can be instrumental in letting you know more about the possibilities, how to reach out to them, etc. So without saying anything else, I open it to the floor. I let all of you, in the order you want. In my mind, this was more like a dialogue, but feel free to jump in, present, do what you want. Just to tell you, there are a couple of students who told me they are very interested in this, but they are in the BMP program. They might be arriving at 1. So when most of these guys are leaving, perhaps at 1 p.m., 2 or 3 more students will show up. So that's it. That's my spiel.
Thank you.
Somebody else should, Sam, perhaps you should be the coordinator now.
I'm a historian, not a social scientist.
Okay,
Anyway.
but to point who should speak.
Maybe the students want to start with questions.
Well,
Maybe that's.
Can I start with one question?
Just
Sure.
one note before
Yeah.
this is an administrative thing. Several of you are freshmen, first time on campus. If you haven't made an advising appointment with either Professor Kulich or myself using Advisement's online system, please do so. Okay? Thank you.
Oh, I was just going to ask, as a quantitative social scientist, how many of you are already declared majors in one of the social science departments? And how many of you are not declared but thinking about declaring a major in one of the social science departments? How many of you are just here for the pizza? Good answer.
I'm in a different category.
What's the different category?
I'm a declared minor in social science.
Oh, I forgot to specify that. I'm sorry. How many of you are declared minor in one of the social sciences? Okay.
I'm wondering maybe each of the fields, the department people could maybe talk for a couple minutes or about whatever they want to talk about in each area, and then that would maybe start the question and answers going.
You want to go for psychology? Yeah.
Okay. So I'm not sure exactly what you'd like to know from us, and that is my first question for you would be then to tell me if there is anything in particular that you'd like to know. But following up on what Dr. Kulich was saying, in the psychology department we do a lot of research. We have 4 labs. Each one is staffed by a number of students and a professor. And we do research on a number of issues and topics that are of interest to the students and interest to the outside world. Dr. Cohen is doing research on how we form memories, in particular memories for things that we want to do in the future. And how once we have created this memory, this is going to shape our behavior. Now this is an aging world where the average age, especially in the West, is growing very rapidly. So you can imagine the kind of impact this kind of research has on the life of many people that will have problems in using this kind of memory in future decades. Dr. Malkow is here, does research on public opinion, how you form public opinion, how you form your judgments about what's going on in the world. I don't know if you're aware of this, one of the reasons why Obama won at the recent presidential elections, that he had a team of behavioral scientists working for him, picking up the trends and the right moves to do in terms of the public opinion. That's what people do in Dr. Mata's lab. In Dr. Jenny Isaac's lab, they work on social development and in particular with an interest of bullies. How bullies is generated in an environment, especially among adolescents, and how the bullying has consequences both for the bullier and for the bullied. And again, this is on the agenda of this country. Finally, this country has realized that bullying is a serious problem. And so studying it in the lab is really an important thing to do. Finally, in my lab, we study how people invent novel means of communication, how they use novel means of communication, and how they communicate in general. Now, we live in a world in which cross-cultural communication is really predominant. We have to communicate all the time. We use social networks, many of them are very new. And knowing how these things work and have some ideas of the mechanisms that are behind these things is a very important thing to have. So this is a sort of a general picture of the kind of things that we do. If you want to know why I personally think you should take full advantage of these labs and the kind of research that takes place there, it's perhaps because you want a career, because you want to go to grad school and so on and so forth. These are all very important and good things. For me, the number one reason is because you may have a very good chance to have fun. And having fun at this stage of your life, actually, entirely through your life, is a very important thing for your mind. A friend of mine was doing research on how you come to be a musician. How many of you have wanted to play any, musical instruments in your lives, or tried, would like to try? A great number. Now, about one in a few thousands of you will actually become a proficient player of an instrument. Why is that? This guy is studying, he's trying to understand why is that. And it's a long, complex story, but the bottom line is very simple. The number one thing that you need to become a proficient player of an instrument is perseverance. You actually spend a lot of time engaged with this instrument. It's kind of trivial. I think all of you have this, and if you're in an honors program, you probably have perseverance. The thing that actually creates perseverance and sustain it over time, this is the problem. To sustain it over a long period of time is one simple thing: having fun. If you have fun in doing what you're doing, you have all that you need to do it well and to do it for a sustained period of time. And I think that if you find something in research, it doesn't have to be necessary. I was trying to hint some fun thing that you can do in psychology, but whatever you can do in this college while you are an honor student to get engaged and have fun, this is going to be the key to a successful and happy future.
Bruno,
Yes.
regarding having fun, the former first trumpet with the Cleveland Orchestra, Bernard Edelstein, started out as an accountant and he was bored with it, and he found playing the trumpet much easier and fun. And he's one of the finest players internationally.
It's a key mechanism. This guy is doing, he puts you in the hand of saxophone that you never played, but he has a piece of software that will play back what you do on the saxophone, like you were, Charlie Parker or something like that. And people start learning how to play this instrument much better because they have a reward cycle. When they do something, they get a reward. That's why I think it's really important that you find something that you like, and you have fun doing. Because you may be doing this for a long time and it may entail a lot of drudgery, a lot of pain. So if there isn't a compensation mechanism that rewards this pain, this drudgery, it's not a sustainable system.
All right, well, I can talk a little bit about economics. This is the timing of this meeting is fortuitous because we've just gotten approved a significant revamping of our major. And so I'll talk about that in a minute, but just as a prelude, one of the issues, we haven't had a lot of students doing senior theses or real research, and one of the obstacles is that economics is a quantitative field, and very few of our students have sort of amassed the quantitative skills, in part because they haven't been required, and also to have done that by their senior year, so that they can spend their senior year making use of those skills. So, we're always asking students to not put off the harder classes until their senior year if they want to be able to do research. But that's, that doesn't always happen. So we're trying to push that a little bit. And the other thing that we've discovered is that there are a number of students who want to take math, but the YC schedule being what it is, they can't fit it in their schedules, given everything else they have to do and all the requirements. So, so what we have done is and this is the second revamping, because this time I think we'll get it right. What we've done is create a mathematical economics track. For those of you who are into math, it's not required to be an economics major, but what it does is allow you to take math as part of the major, and it's very similar to majors at other universities. That you can think of it as a prep for if you're interested in grad school in economics. But more than that, we know that even if you're just interested in getting a job after college, that the first thing employers look for is math skills. They don't even care necessarily if you've majored in economics or taken a finance class. They want to see math because they want to be able to train you, and they can't train you in math really. They can train you in how to use it. So we want to push that. You have a question? Or?
Yeah. No.
Okay. So so the details will be available online, or you can email me if you have specific questions or ask them here. But basically, as part of the major now, what we will do is, for the more mathematically inclined people, we actually allow them to skip the intro sequence in economics, because we think that people who have math skills can do that. And we've also found that the intro sequence is problematic because it's for such a broad audience, including sim students and others. So you can go right into the intermediate level class once you've had just one semester of calculus. But then as part of the major and counting toward the major, you can take calculus 2 and 3, and we also have now this master's program, which is offering more almost graduate level. I mean, it is graduate level, but almost PhD level economics for people who are so inclined in their senior year, or people could stay a fourth year and get a master's. But the point is, we want to start at the beginning and get people prepared to do that. So that's the math track. For the sort of non-math track, we are only requiring a semester of math 14-12 calculus, or even just if you take an AP calculus, that's adequate. So, but the goal is, again, to get people to the point where you can do research in your senior year. Now, research doesn't have to involve math, and in the seminar that I teach on the financial crisis, one of the things we read is a senior thesis by a Harvard student from a few years ago, who I don't think there was a single equation in the whole thesis, but it was about the mortgage-backed securities industry and the ratings and everything that led up to the financial crisis. And it was just a huge, bit of, a lot of data, a lot of statistics, a lot of graphs, but it was something that, you didn't have to actually have calculus for. So you just have to have the ambition. But this was, this thesis is, obviously I'm teaching, including it in my syllabus, and it was something that got a lot of attention in the larger world. And of course, this woman who wrote it, kind of wrote her own ticket to Wall Street. I forget where she is now. I think Morgan Stanley maybe. But the point is, there's a range of kind of research you can do. It doesn't necessarily have to be mathematical or econometrics, but we're trying to encourage people to get that in, by the end of their junior year, so that their senior year they're prepared. So that's the big news in our major.
Questions?
We can let other people speak and talk later, but go ahead, yeah.
Should I wait till the end, or?
Well, if you can take a question now. And then.
So I'm not an econ major. I'm actually kind of like what you were describing on the math major and the computer science minor.
Mm-hmm.
and my future ambition is somewhat more in the middle, looking for a financial mathematics graduate program or something like that. And so it does fall somewhere within economics. So I'm just wondering, for someone who's not an economics major and doesn't really plan on taking a lot of economics classes, are there opportunities within economics research for someone?
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, you should take some economics. In fact, the other thing I should mention is that we've designed this to make it easier to minor, for math majors to minor in economics, and vice versa, economics majors to minor in math, or double major, which has been a problem, as I've said, for a lot of people. So, yeah, I think there's certain classes we could direct you to that would fit in well, and you could minor, as I said, but yeah, I think historically, the people who have gone on to do finance or grad school in economics have actually been math majors, but we're trying to fix that. So you would fit right in, but we can talk about the details another time. Ruth, do you want to talk about it?
Jamie's going to represent us.
Okay.
He's the newest out of the starting gate.
Well, I will try. Maybe I'll tell you a little bit about my research first, and then a little bit about how I imagine what student research might be like. My work, I sort of straddle two parts of political science, and some of you are in some of my classes in American politics, and so I look at questions of mostly justice in American politics in a variety of ways. Both, we're studying civil liberties now, and so the different ways in which our understandings of American values have changed over time. And I'll be teaching a class on public policy next semester that sort of, looks at how we part of the way I'm going to be doing it is to look at some of the ways in which we enact our values by creating public policy that then in turn sort of shapes our political reality. So it gives us a very practical way of looking at the fact, or recognizing the fact that the world in which we live is actually something that's been created by people who lived a few years before us, and can sometimes be difficult to see that. It's easy to take the world for granted. So that's part of what I do has to do with American politics, but I come with a background also. Political science is a strange kind of field that sort of straddles a little bit of the humanities as well. A background in political philosophy, and part of what I try to do there is the more theoretical work along similar sorts of questions about how we can better learn how to live our ethical values, and particularly religious ethical values I'm interested in political life, and how we can better bring that into the public world while avoiding some of the conflicts that sometimes come up. So that's a little bit about what I do, but in terms of, I haven't had too much time because I'm new to think about undergraduate research. But part of the way I imagine it is that there's my interests span pretty wide, and I'm also I think the part of the value of doing research at your level is for you to be able to develop something that doesn't necessarily fall into one of my interests. I'm more than happy to include students in my own work, and to sort of give you a little bit of a behind the scenes look at what research at this level looks like. Because even at this level, it can be very difficult to sort of figure out the intricacies of how actually to research a problem and come up with some answers, and to navigate the institutions of academic life, but to help you develop your own projects. And you're going to find that as you sort of if you pursue this into either graduate work or in the case of political science, maybe government work, that the longer you do this, the more specialized you become. So it's almost natural that whatever that your interests are going to become, in some ways further from my interest the longer you do it. But that's part of what's exciting, I think, from my point of view, which is to engage in that conversation and to learn with you. And anecdotally, part of when I was putting together years ago my application for graduate school, that part of the, I think one of my biggest struggles was trying to, you have to submit work that you've done to these graduate schools. And it's one thing to have to write all of the entrance exams and those kinds of and your personal statement, but to present a piece of research to these schools, if it's not something that you can do in a few months ahead of time, and working on something long term over the course of a year, I think not only will give you something that you can present to schools and that maybe will become the core of a much longer, maybe graduate school education or policy work, but that will give you something interesting, I think, probably to write about in your personal statement, and will give you a little bit of a taste of what I think probably most of us do up here outside of the 5 hours or so that we're in the classroom that you get to see of what we do. That a lot of our lives are actually our professional lives. We're doing something else, and to give you a little bit of a taste of that, I think would be really rewarding.
It's a taste that, if I may add something, may help you also in understanding what is it you want. You may do an oral thesis on a certain topic, and then you decide not to go into grad school on that topic exactly because you experience it. But you want to do it now rather than 3 years into your PhD, 4 years into your PhD, which would be much more painful. So to actually try to do a little bit of what you will be doing in the future is a very good opportunity for you to understand if what you are thinking to do in your future is actually what is actually good for you and what you like doing. And you can imagine doing yourself doing for a long time.
I'll maybe just contribute to that the field of political science, as Professor Rusi says, is somewhat unusual. There are 4 fields: American politics, comparative politics, which studies different state systems across the world, international relations, and political philosophy. And some of those fields are more quantitative than others. Others are more normative. By normative, we mean, I'll just say philosophical. They're exploration of values. So we combine both the normative and the empirical style of research in each of these 4 fields.
I guess I could speak for the sociology department. I'm also new. This is my first year working here, so as far as the nitty-gritty of what kind of courses you need to take and exactly what the major requirements are, I don't have it all off the top of my head, but I can tell you a little bit about sociology as a field and what it does, and especially what it does as distinguished from several of the other social sciences fields with which it's often conflated, in particular anthropology and psychology, as well as give you a sense of the members of our department and the kinds of research opportunities and the kinds of later career opportunities that might be available to you as a function of getting to work with some of us. So I'm gonna do a very big oversimplification, and probably the other members of my companion departments are not going to agree with most of what I'm going to say, but it's generally my understanding that the field of economics is broadly organized around the idea of a kind of behavior, namely choice under constraint. Is that?
That's fair.
Yeah. And that the field of political science is more or less organized around a particular aspect of human interactions, namely power. Is that more or less fair? It doesn't have to be. But,
Again, you're getting in deeper and deeper.
Well, maybe I'll quit while I'm ahead before I characterize psychology, but I'll say that sociology as a field is much more nebulous. Sociology is organized broadly around the study of a number of different, what we think of as social institutions. And an institution is a very broadly defined term, so an institution could mean something like a school, or an institution could mean a company, it could mean a field or an industry, or it could mean a sort of a more nebulous concept like the family or gender. All of those would be things that we would think of at some level as a social institution. One of the strengths, I think, of studying sociology is that it provides you not only with a great amount of sort of content knowledge about whichever institution or whichever process you're actively engaged in studying, but also with a tremendous amount of sort of academic skill and perspective. That is to say, sort of the cognitive ability to look at something that is often taken for granted as sort of extant or real, and approach it with an understanding of its historical and social contingency. So as an example, in one of the classes I'm teaching this semester in medical sociology, we had some very interesting conversations earlier in the semester when I was asking the students to come up with a definition of what is sick and what is healthy. And it turns out that these are concepts that have radically changed across history and are still today radically different across different societies and different cultures. But the definition of sickness and the definition of wellness are not universally acknowledged. They're highly contingent. So sociology as a field teaches you to approach phenomena in the real world with a critical lens vis-a-vis the social and historical contingencies that allow us to arrive at a state where something like sickness or something like gender is seen as sort of objective and as taken for granted in spite of its apparent subjectiveness, broadly speaking. For practical matters, I mean, if you're interested in sociology, then you may be interested in pursuing a PhD in sociology. Certainly I'm biased in that direction. But for other practical considerations, sociology is a wonderful preparation for careers in law and increasingly in medicine. We actually have a number of pre-meds who are sociology majors, and medical schools, the MCATs in particular, are now starting to add questions about sociological concepts of the underpinnings of medicine, of the medical profession, and of health in general. And medical schools are looking to recruit from broader constituent bases than the typical biology, biochemistry, and pre-med fields. For law, there are obvious connections there. There's also social work is one great example of sort of applied sociology, and in particular education as a field. I say in particular education not necessarily because I think sociology is the best preparation for a career in education, although I think it's excellent preparation, but also because our department here at Yeshiva is very strong in the field of the sociology of education. I study education, and our chair, Silke Eisenbree, studies education. Ria Van Rijn also studies education, but from a slightly different perspective. She's more interested in the development of religious identity and how that connects with the sort of training and experiences that people receive in schools, and in particular comparing and contrasting Jewish and Muslim schools in the Middle East. So, and last thing about sociology, as far as research goes, sociology tends to be agnostic as to style of research. We value both quantitative and qualitative approaches. And another nice thing about our department here is that we have professors who are strong in both quantitative and qualitative methods. Professor Eisenbree and I tend to focus more on quantitative approaches, that is either surveys or sort of analysis of secondary data, whereas Professor Van Rijn and Professor Schneider also tend to focus more on qualitative data, that is interviews or ethnography with an eye towards understanding how people interpretively make sense of the world around them and how their values and how their worldviews are constructed and on what bases those constructions move forwards. So I think that might be everything I can extemporize about at the moment. I'd be happy to take any questions either about our department or about sociology as a field and what can be done with it. And I'm very sorry to my colleagues in economics and political science for anything I may have put them out on.
I would just mention that all of these fields have some overlap, and
yes.
If whatever you're interested in, there's certainly opportunities for exploring that overlap. Just within economics, the overlap with political science is the more quantitative end, but issues like game theory is sort of a topic within both fields. The psychology, there's been a lot of interest in
judgment and decision making.
Well, yeah, alternatives to what we call in our field behavioral economics, which basically means departures from the kind of standard rational, quote-unquote rational choice models that are the sort of core of economics. And then sociology, like, for example, labor economics, looks at some of the questions maybe a slightly different way, but there's economics of the family. Gary Becker, who won a Nobel Prize some years ago, is sometimes considered a sociologist. He's looked at crime.
There's an appointment in our department at University of Chicago, which
Okay.
is where I do my undergraduate and graduate work. So.
Right. So he's done work on crime and marriage and the family and so forth. And so there's
Human capital.
Right, and education, of course, is economics of education, and so all these overlap, as they should, because social sciences shouldn't be siloed into distinct areas where people can't talk to each other. Yeah.
You'll also find sociologists lurking in some religion departments.
Yes.
People who teach the sociology of religion, who are appointed in departments of religious studies, as opposed to departments of economics. And speaking of game theory, I have a nephew who teaches economics at Emory, and one of his big things is game theory in the economics department down there.
Yeah, it's a standard subject.
Professor Van Rijn here in our department was sort of deciding between taking posts in teaching sociology or teaching religious studies. She wound up here. She's teaching actually a really interesting class in the honors program next semester called Religion and Society, which I've been talking to her about, and I know she's really excited for. So, if you're thinking about dipping a toe in the water of a sociological approach, her class might be a good way to get started, especially if you're more of a qualitative bent.
Yeah, so I guess I should introduce myself. I'm also a junior in economics. I came from Manhattan originally. It took 4 years my PhD before I switched. So I wouldn't mind being 4 years.
Junior faculty.
Right. And I hope you find it relevant and interesting for psychology and political science and everything else.
Right. So Michael has taught game theory, and I guess you're currently teaching an honors game theory class, so some of you may know him. But we have somebody new coming who's going to be also does game theory, but we'll be looking at what's sometimes called market design and things like auctions and stuff like that. So, but again, these kind of span different areas of social sciences.
I want to say something from the other end. Now we're talking about what we do and what's interesting. I'd like to say something also about how you get there. I think that as an honor student, for what I've seen in these years here, you have a challenge to sort of walk a line between starting at the last minute, when Dr. Quidditch is putting a lot of pressure on you to do an honor thesis now. Then you have like, few months, 8 months, 9 months. That is unless you have, you're very lucky, that is typically too late. If you manage to put together an honor thesis, it's probably not going to be a very good one. At the same time, you don't want, as an honor student, we want you to browse and explore and be curious. So we don't want you to commit to psychology from your first year. But so your challenge, I think, is to find the right balance in between these two extremes. Do a last-minute thesis and start having a commitment to a thesis like 2 years into the program or something like that. So I just encourage you to start thinking about what you like to do and start browsing. So it's never too early to join a lab. I have people that join a lab in their freshman year, and I thought it was a great idea. You don't, of course, you'll have a workload that is different from someone who's about to graduate, but you start getting a feeling for how it works. And then you may do. I had students that were in every single lab we have in the psychology department. We visited all of them. I thought it was a great idea. You're not jealous of each other's students. You actually like when they can take advantage of what we can offer. As a small department in a small school, we want our students to take advantage of all of what we can offer. I cannot offer you all you need to have a future, and so Dr. Malkan, so all of the other professors here, we have to work as a team. So just browse, explore, take your first time, especially the freshman year, take time right now to start exploring these things. So by your second year, entering your third year, you are already onto a path, and then you can start thinking an honor thesis in more than I have 6 months to put together something, because if not, Dr. Preach is going to yell at me. It's not the best way to do this.
Michael has worked in my lab doing political psychology, political attitudes work, but he's doing his honors thesis on perspective memory with Professor Cohen. So it's a good example. Do you want to?
Yeah, I was gonna actually, Dr. Gallantucci beat me to something I wanted to volunteer. I actually don't know if that's why Dr. Coach wanted me to say something. I'm doing something very unique. Basically, in the psych department, we take a course called experimental methods. Experimental psychology, basically learning how to do experiments and how they work. In that course, I basically developed an experiment. What was the process, not the product, but the product worked. So Dr. Cohen was at a conference this summer, told some people who study a related field, and they're like, oh great, let's collaborate. So it ended up being about mid-June time, I get an email from Dr. Cohen saying, hi Michael, these two professors in Canada, one of them is actually an expert in the field of false memory for many years. They want to collaborate with you. And it was June time, and I was like, okay. So 2 months later, many emails back and forth, I decided to collaborate with Dr. Cohen, and I'm writing my thesis on that. For the sake of time, I'm not going to get into the experiment, also because if you know what the experiment is, you can't take it. And that's a major issue in the department. I'm actually at the point where I can't take any experiments in the department because I've read every professor's papers, and I'm colorblind, so I can't do any of Dr. Gallantucci's studies. So, it's actually, yeah. But yeah, so that was really great. I'm collaborating. I guess kind of take a step back to how I started. I'm in my 4th year right now. The joke I make to my psych professor is I didn't exist in the psych department until middle of my 2nd year. I was toying, I knew I wanted to do some sort of research. I tried biology out for a year. I love biology. I'm still a biology major. I didn't want to do biology research. I started psychology, and the 2nd semester I took Dr. Malka's class, and near the end of the 2nd semester I met with him to ask him about research. And Dr. Malka said, "You want to work for me?" I think that's the conversation worked.
That's
Starting my thesis.
That's how I recall it.
Yeah.
Those are my exact words, in fact.
That's on the back. So that meant my 3rd year I was starting research. That's really great, but as Dr. Gallantucci said, it was a little late. And I think it's probably, I enjoy a lot of things I did at YU, but it meant I was more than halfway through my undergraduate experience before I even started the field, started trying out research, and this is what I want to do for graduate school. It's definitely been a minor issue, the fact that I really started research very late. So anyone who's really considering doing research, I really recommend starting sooner rather than later. And I worked with Dr. Malka for over a year. I'm still slightly working for him a little bit. I'm doing this memory research, but I'm also having the problem now that I have 8 months to run an experiment. Ideally, I came across this experiment last year, but if I had 2 years to run the experiment, I could do a lot more with it. Right? I'm taking 3 courses this semester and 3 courses next semester, and probably spending 2 hours a day on my experiment just because I need to get it done before I graduate. Because I won't be able to do this research next year unless, somehow this becomes my life. But yeah, I really recommend getting into research as soon as possible. And the other thing was literally meet with professors. And if your first year you see a professor on the sidewalk, say, oh, I heard you're a psych professor. Can I email you and meet with you? I think you guys are okay with that? And
more or less.
Okay, yeah. Whatever it is, do not hesitate to reach out to professors about doing research because it's really important to start soon and start young. If you're later in your YU career, it's not the worst thing in the world, but definitely start earlier rather than later. And the other thing I want to throw out is things that you just come across things. Like my experimental methods course, we came across my experiment. I was taking a course with Dr. Isaacs. I wrote a paper for her, which would have become my thesis, just because it also seemed like something that could have worked. You want to start soon, but as Dr. Gallantucci said, you don't want to box yourself in because you will come across things throughout your 4 years.
Thanks, Michael. Your points are well taken. Michael's one of 2 people this year who's writing a thesis in psychology. The other is Aaron Cherniak, who's with Jenny Isaacs, I believe. And he's right now conducting his research in Israel. I think he's affiliated at Bar Ilan. And I'm sorry, I can't remember the exact subject of his thesis, but it's he got started early, and as you have recommended, I can look it up for anyone who's interested as to what his exact topic is. But he is working with Professor Isaacs, so we have 2 people this year in psychology.
Yeah, and Cherniak actually he and his wife just moved to Israel. Had he not started early, he could never have done that.
Right.
It was a major issue. Dr. Coolidge had to really work with him to make sure he could move to Israel, and he's moving, but he was lucky. He started very, very early, and he came across this experiment, I think, a while ago.
He's actually taking his last classes at Hebrew University.
Personality.
At Hebrew
Was it Hebrew U?
Yes.
Is he working with...
I don't know, though, if the research is done at Milan. I know that he's taking the classes at Hebrew University.
And then there's Ben Katz. and then who's doing his PhD at Hebrew University in psychology, who wrote his thesis here with us in your department.
Yeah, he did his thesis with me, but he worked in Jenny Isaac's lab. You know, if you choose to work with one of us, it's not, you know, a lifelong commitment that, you know, you'll be studying political psychology. It's good to get the research. So, I mean, don't put too much pressure on yourself in, you know, making the perfect decision. You don't know how your interests are going to develop.
Oh, I was just going to ask about this other student's research at Hebrew University now. Is it with Professor Rami Ben-Benishti?
Oh, Aaron?
Yeah.
Cherniak? I don't know. I'd have to look
if
that
it's,
up.
you mentioned he works in Jenny Isaac's lab. So is it about bullying broadly? That's also what I study, which is why.
No, it's not about bullying. I can't remember what Aaron's working on.
Okay.
But I can find that out for you easily enough.
Sure.
Yeah, I'll email you if you like.
Thanks.
Sure.
Yeah, but I think I would just second or reiterate the idea that you know, regardless of field, you've got to start early, especially people who are going to be here, only be here 3 years. But obviously, it's easier if you stay a fourth year. But and you know, another way, you know, possibly in economics, for example, to sort of get a feel for research is, you know, there may be professors who need research assistants, and you can get a sense of what they're working on, and you know, think about, you know, that could inspire you to come up with your own topic, or they could suggest topics for you. Yeah.
I have two questions. Number one is, I know, and I can't speak for, you know, anything other than, I know, like I was saying, math and the econ-related field, is that a big issue is a lot of times you just need a very broad, like, quantitative base. You know, you have to just have a large amount of knowledge before you can really go into real, deep, you know, like, economics research or math research. So, you know, like, everyone's saying it's really good to start early, but, like, how do you kind of navigate those two aspects of it?
Well, that's why you need, you know, and again, I'm sure in all fields you have to get some guidance about that. No, you don't, you know, you're not, a senior thesis is not a PhD thesis. So, you know, you don't need to be, you know, doing research that's at the forefront of the field and using all of the skills that one gets as a PhD student. You know, like I said, that Harvard thesis that got so much fame, you know, wasn't particularly quantitative. It was just, you know, a very smart person who knew how to ask the right questions and looked and sort of aggressively found data and facts. You know, basically, the thesis was just a big presentation of a huge amount of facts. What happened? You know, okay, so there's a whole range, and it's, you know, I don't want to. I hope I didn't intimidate people by thinking that you have to basically, you know, have PhD level skills to do research. No, you don't. But you know, you need some foundation depending on what direction you go, and I'm sure that's again true across the board.
Yeah, I would add on to that something that I've been telling the students in the research methods class I've been teaching this semester is that the method that you use to approach your research should always be shaped by the question you're interested in asking and answering. So sort of determining your own interests is the first step towards figuring out how you're going to do your research. You know, broadly speaking, that the sort of question you're interested in is more of the how or why variety. That's going to lead you to a different kind of research design than if a question you're asking is how much or when, or sort of questions of those sort. The way you'll approach them will end up being sometimes radically different.
Yeah.
So, Professor Kahn, you mentioned being an assistant research assistant to a professor is a good first step to taking one of these research projects. But I was wondering what other, like I'm a first year on campus, what other steps should similar first-time students be taking in like getting research or ideas for research off the ground?
Well, I think, aside from working with a professor, you know, most of it's going to come from, you know, from the classes that you take. You know, again, in economics, you know, it can be very current events oriented, and you can let that drive some of your choices. You know, in the spring we have a class on health economics. Obviously, that's, you know, big issue in the newspapers these days. But a lot of it has just got to be what gets you going, what motivates you, and what do you find interesting, and bring that up with somebody, with a professor, and say, well, I'm broadly interested in this. I'm interested in crime. How would I approach it? I'm interested in the stock market. How would But usually the mistake people make is to be too broad and think that they're going to do something something very ambitious, and then the task of the professor is to say, okay, now let's narrow that down into something that you could actually do in the space of a few months. But you got to start broad and start sort of introspecting and think about what interests you. And when you're starting out, it's very hard because you may be interested in a whole bunch of things. And so there's just some give and take in the process of narrowing it down into something manageable.
I was also wondering how much cohesion is there between different departments and different areas that overlap. You were mentioning before how behavioral economics really gets into kind of is broader than economics. It also gets involved in sociology and psychology and questions like that. And so if someone has an interest in something that's really just broader than one specific department, how would they approach that?
Well, yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say that making an appointment to meet with a professor and ask questions is under no circumstances a commitment, right? So if if you're interested in studying something about behavioral economics and you make an appointment to meet with Professor Malka and you talk with him and it turns out that your interests don't really align very much, you can ask him, well, who should I talk to about this, or is there some other person I can work with? There can be a sort of an iterative process of finding people whose interests align with yours.
There are interdisciplinary honors theses that work on them, and you usually have two professors who are going to be the readers. Not to drive you crazy, one will probably be the lodestar in terms of guidance, but you'll have two people usually who will be involved. And I would just say in terms of political science that we don't have laboratories, so that the process of discovering a thesis topic I would say is more evolutionary. It depends upon a certain intellectual maturity to ripen your interest, and that can come certainly through courses, but it can also come through internships. Most of our students will do some kind of internship work, and out of that might come an idea for a thesis. But also the way the department is organized, aside from the 4 introductory courses in each of the 4 fields that we require you to take, a student then concentrates in an area of his choosing. So it could be international relations with an emphasis on foreign policy. It could be comparative politics, which is my area, with emphasis on Europe, which I teach. It could be political philosophy, which I also teach, and Professor Arusi with an emphasis on, let's say, Machiavelli. So out of the courses, for example, a present political science student who is also a pre-med student is doing his honors thesis on what factors worked against the development of a real fascist party in the United States. And he came upon that last year in a course. But it was also that interest had been, shall we say, ready to incubating and ready to grow, and it just happened to come out at that time. So in our case, it's less that you're picking out some professor because of a lab, and it's more because of the evolution of your interests. So what we would recommend is you get as much internship introduction to internships as possible, and also a wide variety of courses, of course, within your concentration. And talk to your faculty. I agree with Professor Galantucci. That's very important, and you should have fun, and you should be very much involved with your faculty.
I just wanted to maybe answer your question about interaction more specifically. We probably, candidly, don't do as good a job with that as we could. I mean, there's some cross-listed courses now and then, but when you want to do something a little bit interdisciplinary, sometimes you have to do, a little bit of the legwork yourself. Or I mean, obviously, ask people, talk with people, but it's not always apparent, from a cross-listed course, or there isn't already a program set up, with few exceptions.
Just to add on to that, we now do have, however, an interdisciplinary minor in public health, which is biology, political science, psychology, and sociology.
And economics.
And people will be working in that. I've already had a number of students come and talk about that. So I think the future will be more those kind of interdisciplinary minors and perhaps even majors.
But I think the point is, once you start multiplying fields, then the number of possibilities increases. So it's very hard to it's hard to standardize, and so that's why you end up needing to with some exceptions kind of find your own way in it. So.
Are we finished?
I think
Anybody have
so,
more
yeah.
questions? Thank you very much for coming.